Welcome back to the Elite Performance Podcast. Today, our guest is Scott Meier. Scott is the head strength and conditioning coach at Farmington High School in Farmington, Minnesota. Today, Scott and I discuss what it all entails being a high school strength and conditioning coach and how he structures his training program and how that fits within the yearly plan of his school. Farmington High School works on trimesters, so he talks about how he structures his trimesters with his athletes and what all goes into dealing with athletes ranging from 9th grade to 12th grade and every sport imaginable. As Farmington High School works with, I believe Scott said, close to 15 varsity sports and over 500 student athletes in a given year. So obviously some tremendous challenges with that, and Scott discusses how he works in that regard, how he gets sport coaches on board to trust his training process, and how he works in his assistants and interns into that process. Scott is also the Minnesota State Director for the National High School Strength and Conditioning Association. Scott talks about his role with the NHSSCA and the job that this organization is doing to help build knowledge and promote high school strength and conditioning as a career path for many in this field. So if you are a young coach looking to get into the high school setting, this is a great episode, and Scott shares a lot about what he does with his high school athletes. Finally, I encourage everybody here to follow Scott and Farmington High School Strength and Conditioning on social media platforms, as Scott does a great job of promoting his programs to his athletes and parents, especially in today's society and world with young athletes, being involved in those platforms. It is very important for coaches to build buy-in and trust and to give our athletes a little bit of loving, if you would, on those platforms. And Scott does a really good job of sharing his programs and insights and what he's doing and promote some of the great work that his students, athletes are putting in. It is a great episode. So without further ado, let's get you to Scott. Welcome back to the Elite Performance Podcast. Today, our guest is Scott Meier. Scott, how are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. How about you?
Good. Let's go and start with a little introduction. Give us a little background about what you're doing today and how you got there.
I'm the head strength and conditioning coach at Farmington High School in Minnesota. And I just started this is my 19th year there. So been there quite a while. I got hired initially for middle school Phi Ed, and the strength job also happened to be open, so I kind of took that. And then we opened a new high school 9 years ago. So I kind of shifted up. Our 9th graders were at the middle school, and then they moved up to the high school. So we're now a 9 through 12 high school building, and I kind of moved up to the high school and have been there ever since.
Excellent. So 19 years coaching high school strength and conditioning. I mean, 19 years ago, I didn't know some of those jobs existed. How did that come into fruition?
I was just really fortunate that there was an athletic director that was kind of, ahead of the game. And actually, I coached at Lakeville for 2 years before that, and they also had a position. Really? And, it was pretty rare at the time. There weren't many coaches that had that position like that, head strength coach. I'd say for sure less than probably 10 in the state. So just full-time strength and conditioning for coaching, and just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Now, during those 19 years, have you had any other duties such as coaching any sports at all, or has it just been strictly strength conditioning and PE?
Just strength and conditioning and PE. So it's year round. I've had opportunities, or track coaches have wanted me to kind of help them out sometimes, but if I'm coaching a sport too, I'm still in charge of the weight room. So it'd be hard to, kind of do both and handle all the programming and stuff like that. Just time wise, it just doesn't work. But, I'd love to coach track at some point, but, it just doesn't necessarily work out time wise.
Yes. Give us a little background on Farmington High School. What's the enrollments? Talk about a little bit about your weight room. What's the size of your weight room? How many racks? How many sports are you working with? How many student athletes in a typical day or week are you typically seeing?
Farmington is we're a southern suburb of the Twin Cities, and we're kind of a growing area. It's really starting to pick up again, but we're in the top class for all sports now. We've got an enrollment of, I believe this year is just over 2,000 students, 9 through 12. We have almost all of our varsity teams, and a lot of our lower level teams are on board with the strength and conditioning. So there's only just a handful of teams that aren't in there, and a lot of those kids are in during the off season too. So it's, I don't know. I think if I had to guess, I think it's like 17 different varsity teams between boys and girls. It's quite a few. As far as our weight room, we have it's a 4,700 square foot room, and it's kind of a bizarre shaped room. When we were building the school, they didn't really take into account our input on anything for the room, so we kind of end up with this weird space. But everything fits in. We've got 9 squat racks, 9 platforms, and then 9 multi-bench or multi-rack stations with a bench. And then some free weight dumbbell, some hammer strength back machines, stuff like that kind of down in one end.
Okay. So, working in the high school setting, you're working with hundreds of athletes from 9 through 12. I mean, you can get every make and model of an athlete in that, in that demographic. So talk about how you handle this. First, let's talk in regards to the grades or the ages. How do you split up, the grades 9 through 12? Are they coming in during classes, or, even within their sport, are you breaking up age groups differently, or how are you doing that?
Yeah, we've got classes in the weight room all day long, which is awesome. And we basically have 3 different course offerings that include weight training. So one is our regular weight training class, which is grades 10 through 12, and that they lift 4 days a week. We also have a sports conditioning class, which is 3 days of lifting and 2 days of speed and agility. And then we have a 9th grade fitness for life class. In that class, we're in there lifting twice a week, and then kind of some other cardio or some speed training a little bit, just some other random type fitness type days. But with that 9th grade class, it's nice because it's all kind of beginners, a lot of them. So that we're grouped together with them, which works out good. When our teams come in to lift, we schedule specific time slots for each team. And when 9th grade teams come in, it's just pretty much they're grouped together. So we can change it differently. It's not, 9th grade in with varsity at the same time. We've got them kind of separated. In our summer program too, we have 8th and 9th grade combined together, which keeps that younger age group so we can really work on some basics and some movement patterns and kind of build from there. So we try to keep them separate, at least initially, and then as they get older, things kind of blend together a little bit more.
So are most of your athletes, say, in one of those classes during the day, or are a lot of them not taking those classes and doing stuff after school? How does that break down?
It's kind of a combination. It depends on the sport, but like football right now, almost all of our guys are in a lifting class. So then they don't have to lift after school. I think there's only about 8 to 10 guys that aren't in class right now, which is nice because then they get their workout done during the day. We got a little bit more time. For 9th grade, it's more as a team basis. There are a handful of kids that have the class right now, but most of them is after school lifting.
Okay. So then how do you handle those teams or sports after school? Especially with, high school kids, although we're seeing a little bit of decline, but some of these kids are in season all year round if they're playing 3 sports. How do you handle the different sports and then kids playing multiple sports?
We use kind of pretty much a unified program where everyone's doing similar stuff, and in season, we still go heavy. I apply the triphasic training stuff. So we still do triphasic, in season and off season. So basically our in-season program is just a shortened version of our off season. We spend a half hour versus an hour pretty much. And we always do, like with our off-season program, we always do what I call our big 3 lifts. And it's something in a squat rack, something on the platform, and then either an upper body push or pull usually. So our in-season teams do the same thing. It's just a little bit lower intensity, a little bit lower volume. And then we just don't do the auxiliary stuff after the end.
Okay. Excellent. And now with 17 teams, how do you go about scheduling? That's got to be kind of a challenge as well, with coaches maybe wanting certain time slots. But how do you schedule all these different teams and athletes in the short amount of time that you may have after school?
Yeah, it's getting trickier and trickier as more teams kind of get involved, and then they want lower levels in there as well. So I try to schedule teams either right before practice or right after their practice. So they'll come in like right after school is done, lift, and then head off to practice. And in that middle, that's when we work with our off-season kids. And a lot of times we'll have them doing some speed and agility stuff first while we're waiting to get in the room. Then when they get done, then the teams start coming in later after practice is done and getting their workout in. And we've got enough stations where if we go groups of, we can handle groups of 3 pretty easily. There's enough space. So I can, a lot of times, depending on the size of the team, I can double up and go 2 teams at once. If they're small teams, I could even go 3 teams. So it's tricky. And in the fall, it seems like, too, everybody, except for football, everybody has games on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Okay.
So that means that everybody wants to lift Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and it gets a little crowded in there sometimes, but so far we're able to make it work.
Do you have an assistant or any interns helping you out?
In the fall, I don't. Luckily, coaches come in and kind of help out a little bit when their teams come in, just to help keep an eye on stuff. But in the winter, I have 2 assistant coaches, and in the spring, I've got 1. So I do have a little help. And then in the summer, we've got 5, 6 coaches there all the time.
Oh, excellent. Now, you're the Minnesota State Director for the NHSSCA. Talk about what that is and what your role is within that organization and that group.
Yeah, the National High School Strength Coaches Association was formed last year, and it's just been phenomenal. The 4 founders have been just outstanding, but it's an organization designed and geared toward high school coaches. High school levels work different than working with college athletes and working with pros, and different than personal training. And it's not a knock on the NSCA, but their umbrella is so wide. They're covering a lot of different areas. So the NHSSCA really is geared strictly for high school coaches, and I've found it to be just fantastic. So last year they're starting it out really well too. I think last year, just a few months after founding, they were able to pull off an incredible national conference. So the national conferences are going to be every year. Now this year they're spreading out to regional conferences. There are 8 regions in the country, and there'll be a regional conference in each region every throughout the year this year. And then next year the plan is to do state conferences. So for me as a state director, I'll kind of be in charge of the state conference and state clinic. And but right now I don't have a ton of things to do. It's just basically compiling a list of coaches within the state to be a kind of a go-to point person for questions. And I've been getting all kinds of questions from different coaches too about all kinds of different strength-related stuff. But basically, I'm kind of a go-to guy right now, and the plan is to go with the state clinics next year. Interesting.
So let's just look at the conference that you guys are in. How many schools in your conference have a full-time strength and conditioning coach? That's strictly their job.
Let's see. In our conference, there are 10 schools. Every school has a strength coach. A couple of them are also football coaches.
Okay.
But I think at least half has a full-time strength guy there.
Okay.
And then I was going to say a lot of those football coaches are also PE teachers, I think.
Yep.
So they're in the weight room all day.
Yeah.
So it's pretty good.
Yeah. I know it's a growing field, and certain areas see it a lot more than like where I'm at right now. I mean, we have 5, 6 high schools within like a 30-mile radius, and I don't know, maybe one has someone that's actually like a full-time strength coach that's certified and has all the credentials, whatnot. The rest are just, like you said, every sports coach basically runs their own program in there, And I've heard a range of things on that front. You know how that would go with a sport coach on the run a strength program. Not always the most optimal, but I always thought, interesting in certain areas and conferences and, school sizes play a factor in that too. But it's nice to see that it's growing, that there's more and more full-time strength coaches in the high school setting.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I'm seeing it more, smaller outstate schools. In the metro, it's more common, but even smaller schools in more rural areas have some just outstanding programs and some great coaches. And, they have things pretty established. It's going great.
Yeah. I really like the work that they're doing. The NHSSCA is really doing a good job. So let's backtrack a little bit here. High school kid walks in, so a ninth grader walks in. What are some things that you see commonly missing from these kids coming into your programs? And what are some things that you do to try to bridge them in terms of keeping them healthy, but also increasing performance?
Some of the big things, the two big movements that I look at are squats and hip hinge. So those are the two things we just really hammer on right from the beginning. And I'm really lucky now. We've got a good kind of program in PE strength thing going at the middle schools. So I've got kids coming in now as ninth graders that have a good year of lifting and training underneath by the time they get to us. So that's helped a ton. I can notice a huge difference from that. But one of the things I've always kind of noticed in kids, even since the very beginning, is kids don't know how to run. Running form and running technique is terrible. Arms are flying all over the place. Heads are looking up and wobbling side to side, stuff like that. So we spend a lot of time with our speed and agility program working on technique and form and constantly hammering that. And then I think one other thing too is I think like overall athleticism from kids now is not what it used to be. And I think it's just because everything is so structured now with kids at a younger age. They're not doing pickup games or going to a park and throwing stuff together with their friends. Everything is super structured, super sport oriented. So within that sport, they can do what they need to do. But overall, general athleticism, I think, is lacking a little bit. Yeah.
So let's go to your middle school program. What does that look like? What are those kids getting introduced to in that program?
Well, we're super lucky. The middle school that I taught at had a bunch of free weights and some Noodles stuff, and they got a grant and were able to redo the entire room. So they've got about a 4,000 square foot room with 7 double-sided squat racks, inlaid platforms, bumper plates. It's, I think it's probably one of the nicest middle school weight rooms in the country. It's unbelievable. It's probably nicer than the room I have at the high school. But so I've got 2 awesome coaches there. One's our head wrestling coach, and he was the strength coach of the school he was at before. Then we got another guy he was a strength coach at his previous job and a PE teacher. So both these guys have an awesome background in strength and conditioning. I trust they can do whatever they need to do, and it's going to work out. It's going to work out great. It doesn't add anything onto my plate.
Yeah.
So they're doing basically the same stuff we're doing: squats, hip hinge, movement, all about technique and form. Not worrying about weights, but just getting movement patterns down. And it's part of their PE option. They have an option of choosing either regular Phi Ed or weight training. And they've got pretty much a full day of weight training all day long now, which is awesome.
Yeah. You talked about one of your basic programs is Triphasic. So how do you implement that throughout the year and with different athletes?
Pretty much, if I break things down, it works out great for us as we're on trimesters for classes. We got 3 trimesters, and they line up really well with sports seasons. So at the end of the trimester is coming. It's also kind of the end of the fall sports season. Then we shift over to winter trimester, winter season starts. So we kind of do it basically year round on a seasonal basis. So I always kind of start out with a block 0 or general block first week or 2, depending on the team, to kind of get back into things. And then we'll jump into the eccentric block, and we'll do eccentric work for 2 to 3 weeks. And then follow up with that with usually about 2 weeks of isometric work, and then bring it home with the concentric, heavy, fast stuff to the end of the season or in a trimester for our testing. And we do that both in season and off season. And it's worked really, really well.
Yeah, that's nice that they kind of match up with the sports as you finish off and go to the power, the speed type block there at the end. They're on their championship or end of the year kind of type of thing where you want them to be kind of peaking a little bit. So that's nice timing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It works out well for everybody.
So walk us through what a typical session would look like then from start to finish.
Well, like I said, we always start with our big three. So we're doing some sort of squatting movement every day, whether it's, and I kind of mix it up between a front squat, back squat. We'll throw in overhead squats. It's what Cal Dietz calls a sport back squat, where it's a more narrow stance squat with toes pointing straight ahead with your feet right directly below the hip joint. We'll throw that in. Then we're always doing something on the platforms, either an Olympic lift or a deadlift. Throwing RDLs too sometimes is a big one. Sometimes that's an auxiliary. And then we do either like a bench press, some kind of press or pull, either pull-ups, inverted rows, bench press, incline bench. And then we kind of usually go by time. So I've got a timer set up, so we're all in a spot for, anywhere from 8 to 10 minutes, depending on, the day. And then we just kind of rotate between those big three. So it keeps everybody on task. Everyone's in their spot. They just stay right in their row as we rotate. And then when we're done with the big three, in-season teams are pretty much done. Sometimes we'll throw a challenge on the end there. But then off-season and classes, then we go and do the auxiliary stuff. And I kind of let them go on their own. And that's the auxiliary stuff just fits in with what we're doing for the big lifts that day. And I try and mix it up, try and throw in a lot of variety and some other things there just to help keep bodies fresh and keep them on task a little bit.
How long is your typical class? So during the day, where kids are in one of your classes, how long is that class?
We have a 5-period class day, which is nice. So after we take attendance and let kids change and get warmed up and stuff, we've got 45 to 50 minute time block actually in the weight room to lift. So it's a good length of time.
Yeah, it's a really good length of time. Something that I know I've observed from you in the past is you do a lot of different kind of, like you said, challenges or testing in terms of, competition, just, letting kids compete. What are some of the things that you've done in that? I know some coaches in the past have asked about, just things like you said, to throw at the end, to have a competitive environment, get kids fired up. What are some things that you found to be really beneficial to have a challenge or a test at the end?
Well, we use Train Heroic, which is really awesome for doing this because you can make a leaderboard on there out of everything. So a lot of times it ends up being more endurance type stuff, but flexed arm hang is always an easy one to do. We've got enough between all of our squat racks and stuff. We can get bunch of kids going at once. We'll do like a regular bar hang. We'll do max reps on bench press with like half your body weight. Plate pinch is always a good one. We take 2 like 10-pound plates and just squeeze them together with one hand. And that's fun because as soon as the plates drop, everybody in the room knows someone's out. And but it's just a good way to add some competition in. And I try to mix it up. I would like to do them once a week if we can. It ends up being probably every 2 weeks. But when I was kind of talking with Train Heroic people when we first started doing that, they recommended, mixing the tests up so that every kid at some point has a chance to be kind of in the top 10, like maybe every 4 or 5 times.
Yep.
So they're going to be successful or feel they have a chance to win, which is a good way to mix it up. You don't always want to do something that's is an advantage for all the strong guys. You don't want something that's always the super light kids that can hang on a bar for 2 minutes. And, so we try to mix it up, but it's always a good atmosphere when we're doing it and kids are kind of into it when we do it.
Now let's transition to, you said I think you said 2 days a week, you have a speed and agility, more of a speed and agility emphasis. You do a lot of great work with your kids on, like I said, letting them be kids and, letting them play in different kinds of, reactive games. Talk about what the structure of that class and what it looks like and how you break down that class in terms of how you're designing your daily program, et cetera.
Well, usually if for 2 days a week for the speed and agility, we'll do one day of straight near speed, a lot of mechanics, all out sprint stuff, either on the track. Oh, I'm getting unstable. And then the second day is more agility related. And, we're trying to do more reactive type agility. And really that all comes from the stuff that you've been posting, stuff I've seen you guys do down there. It's phenomenal. And the kids just love it. It's definitely more sport specific than, we used to do a lot of pro agility and line drills and cone drills. So we've gotten away from that and are doing more of that partner reactive type stuff.
Yeah, talk about the game I just saw you doing the other day. You had the colored noodles. What did you call that game again? Go ahead, break that down for the listeners, because I found that very interesting.
This is probably the greatest game I've ever come up with. We call it Jedi Tag.
There you go. Yes.
So the kids I bought a whole big box of swimming noodles and cut them down into thirds. So they're about like 18 inches or so. So each kid's got one. And basically we just use it for tag. And when you've got these noodles, these kids are just going after each other, smacking them with the noodles. So we've done some you could really do any kind of tag game, but we did, we call it Jedi Tag. So every kid has a noodle, and if you get hit, you're out. And last person standing wins. And then a different variation I've done is where if you get hit, instead of being out or moving out, you just take a seat right where you got hit.
Yep.
And if an active player's, they're running all around you. If you hit an active player, then they're out and you're back in.
Yep. Okay.
And then you can also do teams, which I got from another coach on Twitter, I think. They did teams. So each team, I've got 5 different colored noodles.
Yep.
So a team has a whole, it's a blue, every team has a blue noodle, or one team has all blues, the next team has all greens or yellows. Then you can do a team thing where it's one team against the next. And if you got a team member that's out, if an active player runs in, you can touch them and then they're back in.
Okay.
So there's all kinds of different strategies there, but kids are just running all over the place and they just love it. They ask to play it every day.
Yeah.
I think the whole Jedi Tag class and have it filled up. It's cool if we did a registration for it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, noodles get them for like $1 or $2 at Walmart, and you get 3-4 noodles out of one of those big ones. I mean, they're awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, and a lot safer than saying just playing tag and stuff like that. And then the kid gets noodles hand, and all of a sudden they turn into a different person.
Yeah, it just ramps up everything. We did, some of these reactive, like stalking type drills for agility, and as soon as they had a noodle in their hand, it's like this. The kid with the swatter, he was going after him like crazy, and the kid getting chased was literally running for his life. And we never had anything even close to that intensity without the noodles. So yeah. It's awesome to watch.
Yeah, I love to hear those variations that you use. I'm going to have to steal a couple of those. The Jedi, I like that one. So let's go. What's something that you're doing this year that maybe is different than you've done in years past, or things that you're experimenting with?
Like I said, the reactive agility, that's a new big thing we just really added this summer and are doing it all the time. I'm trying to get in more mobility things. We've been doing a lot more crawling type things, both, forward, backward, lateral, and doing more stuff with, like rolling on the ground and getting up. I heard Coach John McKenna out in New Jersey, he was talking about how kids really don't know how to fall anymore. Because if you see, a kid running down the field and he falls down, it's like he got shot. He's just down and out. Kids don't know how to roll and get up quick and get back into the game. It's, which I think is true. It's crazy. So we just do a lot more like forward roll, start, side roll, starts, drop down, get up type thing in the middle of a sprint, or in the middle of a change of direction. So that's kind of a new thing. but I also want to get into more unilateral type movements or unilateral lifts, more than what we have before. So we're trying to work that stuff in too.
Excellent. Well, kind of one of the final questions here for you is, with 17 different sports, how has it been working with sport coaches? I mean, obviously you've been there for 19 years, so for a lot of them, the buy-ins, just, probably goes way back. But I know it's a challenge with many coaches at high school level, even at the college level, is, getting buy-in from the sport coaches. So what have you done, or what things do you do to continue to get buy-in and support from them?
Yeah, I'm lucky. I've had some really good support. Obviously football is always on board. But our head boys basketball coach, who just stopped coaching basketball last year, he also teaches Phi Ed with me, and he actually handles the majority of the weight training classes. I've got a combination of weight training and sports conditioning, and I do all the fitness classes too. So he was a head coach, also head strength coach at his previous school. So I've got, multiple PE teachers and coaches and all those other guys too. They all coach football as well. So wrestling is in the weight room all the time. That's a given for them. They know that. Boys basketball was a given because their coach is a strength coach. So they're in all the time. So we got that kind of carryover. And then our girls basketball coach, she was hired, I think this is her third year this year. She has been a huge help for me in getting the girls sports in. As soon as she came to me right away and said, "Hey, we're gonna be in there all the time. We're lifting in season, off season." And then, a lot of those girls also play lacrosse. They play soccer. They play volleyball. So we happen to have a new girls lacrosse coach come in. So Liz, our basketball coach, went to the lacrosse coach and said, "Hey, you got all my girls here. You got to get them in the weight room. Look at what it's done for us." So it carries over to that, then it carries over to the fall sports. But she has really been a huge help for me in getting those girls teams in. And now other sport coaches are kind of the same thing. They're working together. Football and basketball have been working on the baseball coach, because we have a lot of baseball players that play football, and we don't want them to lose strength in season. So they're on board. And but it's changed a lot. When I first got hired, it was a lot of still old school coaches who had been there for a long time and didn't really see the benefits or the huge benefits, or didn't want to commit the time to it. And we were also a smaller school then too, and we could get by with some really good athletes. But now the new coaches that have come in, they understand it. They've, lifting for them has been a big part of probably their personal life, as well as how they've been growing up in their sport and their coaching careers. So all the new coaches are really on board, and it's just kind of one of those things. Coaches work together. Everyone, I think, sees the value of having strong, fast kids all the time.
Yeah, that's nice when you get one or two sport coaches on board, and they just they share your message with all the other coaches. That's awesome.
Yep.
All right, so Scott, give me your three must read or top books that you would suggest to young coaches, other coaches in our field. 3 books that you've made a big impact on you as a coach.
Well, the Triphasic training by Cal Dietz is huge for me. That really, over the course of the time I've been coaching, that's probably had the biggest impact on anything we've done. And the early one that's kind of helped shape me a little bit was The Facts and Fallacies of Fitness by Dr. Mel Siff. He also did super training, but that book really kind of opened my eyes when I was first starting out about, how there's more than one way to do things. And coming out of college, you listen to your professors, you're taught this stuff, this is how you do it, and this is what it is. And then, after reading the Siff book, it's like, there's a lot more to this. There's not definitely one way. And in fact, a lot of things I was taught in college was not necessarily true at all, and kind of flip things. So that one for me was a big one. And then right now I'm reading Brett Bartholomew's Conscious Coaching. So I'm not all the way through it and kind of doing chapters at a time, but that book's been outstanding too, and I would highly recommend that one.
Yes. Oh, yeah, great choices. I never read The Facts and Fallacies. I'll have to look into that one. But anything by Yuri is a good choice.
Yep. Yep.
All right, next one. So you can bring any three people, dead or alive, to dinner with you. Who you inviting to dinner with you?
Um, well, I thought about this one. This is a hard one. For
Yeah.
sure, I would say both of my grandfathers. Both of them passed away when I was really young, and I never really got to know them. So I would love to have dinner with them. Beyond that, I don't know. I'll just stick with those two.
Okay, perfect. Awesome, Scott. And let's finish up here. Where can listeners find more about you and learn more about the great programs that you're doing up there at Farmington?
Social media is probably the easiest place, and we are at Farmington Power, and that's on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I don't post a ton of stuff on Facebook that seems to be more geared toward parents and stuff I share, but I post a ton of stuff on Twitter and Instagram. And then our website is farmingtonstrength.com, but I don't use that a whole lot, and it's mainly just kind of a record board and alumni list and stuff like that. But Twitter and Instagram are the top two at Farmington Power.
Awesome. Well, Scott, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know we had some difficulties connecting, but I really appreciate this conversation and all that you're doing for those young student athletes up there at Farmington.
Yeah, thanks. It's an honor to be on. You've had some really heavy.
Please join me in thanking today's guest, Scott Meier. What a great episode with Scott, sharing a lot of detail and insight to what all goes into being a high school strength and conditioning coach, and some of the challenges and how he tackles those challenges of working with so many different athletes of so many different ages and every different sport, and how he fits that into his daily routine. As always, please give Scott a shout out on social media. Thank him for taking the time today and sharing such insight and details into his work and promoting the field of strength and conditioning coaches in the high school setting. Until next time, we'll see you back on the Elite Performance Podcast.